Hi. So today we are gonna do lesson two, which is about creating skills file uh, in Claude Code. And skill files are like functions. So they are the tasks which you want to repeat again and again. So you make a skill file of that, and whenever you want to use, just use it with a hash and the name of the skill. So just to remind, in the last lesson, we built some trackers, which were like three trackers. Finance tracker, time tracker, and then some exercise tracker. So in this lesson, what we will do is we will use those trackers and make them publishable on GitHub. And this is a skill because we want to do it for every tracker. So basically, we create the skills once, and then we kind of use it again and again as a skill set. So we have to understand what a skill is. How does it differ from the Claude.md file? Um, Learn how do we make this file. Usually, um, now this comes under command, so you call it command.md file. You see where we kind of create these files, and then how do we invoke it using hash. So let's go back to our code base. So I have added what is the goal of this lesson. So the goal is host the personal trackers, which we created in lesson one, which were HTML files on GitHub pages, and then learn how to build a reusable Claude Code skill, which you can deploy using just a single hash. So usually, whenever you want to, so the difference between, I will directly go here. I have a file which talks about how this works. And for easy read, I'm gonna make it. This is much more easy to read. So how skill work in Claude Code is, so when we created this Claude.md file, this was mainly a broader picture of how and what the project is doing. Task files were specific to a certain task, and the context. So if you have three sessions, you will always load the Claude.md and then a task file and whatever conversation you have in that session. So skill is something which is a reusable command which you invoke again and again depending on how frequent you're going to use. And this is, I look it as similar to functions. So you write a function, keep it at one place, and then again use it again and again. So like that, you make different, whatever in your project you need a repeatable script. Instead of writing code, you write that into in like a language form and then exactly list out the instructions you want in that skill. And you can think about using it because every time you don't have to specify what you want to do exactly, and you may miss sometimes, the exact instruction. So it's always better to have this skill file. So this is the difference. Claude.md is where the project is. Task file is specific, what you want to do right now, and the skill is more like reusable recipe. So where do we create this file? So usually you can create .file.skill. It can be under skill or it can be under command. So I think recently I found that it should be under commands. So you put the name of the skill dot and with MD file. Whatever is your name, you have to then invoke it with the same name. So make sure that this is specially descriptive and like it can mention what the skill is about. It's similar to like naming a function. So what you're gonna write in the skill file. So it's an instruction that Claude will follow when the skill is invoked. So like what do you want to refer, what commands to run, what steps to follow, and you can also pass some arguments, which we will do in this case. This is important how the context workflow in the skill. Uh, Whenever you launch a session, Claude session, it will have a built-in a prompt, which is you don't control that. Then you have Claude, which is a project level. Then conversation history, whichever you talk to the Claude. Then skill prompt content, which is the content from this skill file and whatever the tool results happen in the session. Um, so there's some more key points you can go through. And so there's some, I have listed some difference between what happens without skill and with skill. For example, if you don't use skill, what happens? You have to type that same multi-step deployment instructions again and again. You might forget some steps sometimes, and it's always in. So it's very similar to how a function works. So it's a function that's the how I remember. So yeah, so let's see how what is written in this skill file. Or you can also say these are the commands which we kind of give it to Claude. Um, so now what is here? Okay, so this is a skill file, which means that host on GitHub pages, deploy HTML file on GitHub pages. This is how it works. So I'm going to give it slash the skill name and then file for that file or the directory. So identify the file to deploy. So there are different cases in how it's going to identify which file to deploy. So if it has HTML file, it will use directly. If it has .py file, which means it has to run with Python and then generate the HTML file and then use it as to deploy it on GitHub. It can be a directory, so it's going to look for both .py and HTML inside it and repeat the process. And if this is empty, then by default it will pick up the lesson one trackers. Then generate static HTML from Python tracker script. So it's basically giving the instruction. You can go into the detail how it's being done. And for even for these files, you don't have to write everything from scratch. You can get a template from Claude. So you kind of describe what kind of features you want, and then it creates a skill file, and you can go through the file and edit as you want. So take help from Claude to prepare these. But make sure that you review all of these steps because if you miss once, you are gonna use the wrong script again and again. And then we kind of tell where all of the information will be on the GitHub for GitHub pages. Kind of how do you configure, commit, and push. So whenever there's some changes in the tracker, where do we like push all of those information and report the live URL. And there's some important things, what not to modify. There's some instruction to the Claude. Again, you can take help from Claude to design this and then review it yourself to make edits. So now let's see what happens. So let me open a Claude session. So I already deployed the 3 pages and it was like, so now if I do a slash, I see host dot on, then you can actually put tab and then I can point to my tracker. I can just go and maybe this copy. Okay, so I've given it .py is going to execute the py file and it's already live on the GitHub, but you can see the trace. Like I'll start by reading the exercise tracker Python file to understand its structure and functionality. It's doing something. So I'll show you, but you can see how it's gonna let me check. Okay, so it's basically I can show you where it's gonna give me a link, I think. So repos and then the pages, it should be somewhere. Okay. So I already have the pages which are deployed on GitHub, and I have made a landing page where there are three trackers, which they look cool, right? So this is live on the GitHub. If you see this github.io and the Claude my repo and then index file, and I can start a time tracker, start time, maybe study, project, Claude, beyond prompting. Okay, so I can start a timer. So I'm studying, and then you can stop the timer. You can see all entries, summary, how much you studied, which is actually very cool. You can track expenses, food $10, lunch maybe. Backtrack, did we lose the entries? Let's see. No, we didn't. So it's working. Exercise tracker, maybe sports, running, 30 minutes, history. So this is pretty cool, right? And so now if we do any kind of HTML, it's it's easily deployable to GitHub page just by host on GitHub slash. So yeah, give yourself so you can go to this repo, get all of these skill files, the skill file and all the instructions, and you can try it by yourself. So yeah, that's all for this lesson. Thank you.